partly it's this dependency on peer review that is turning scientists into cowards. And instead of exchanging ideas just to improve the science, and this is how science improves, right? You contradict one another, everyone knows that. Instead of doing that, people are just really afraid of retaliation, and for good reason, because we are extremely fragile. All we have is our good name, and reviewers have huge power over us. So this was also called the tyranny of the reviewer. The question is, what do you do about it? How do you get around it? Because we do need feedback. The papers improve because of the feedback. We are desperate for feedback at any level. Students need feedback. The PIs are, first of all, they don't know everything, and second, they are not always available to give constructive feedback. And also, the most experienced scientists, they need feedback, and we all have blind spots. And but good feedback is hard to find.
At their core, scientists are creatives and problem solvers. They push the boundaries of physics and biology, turning what often seems like science fiction into reality. Dr. Oded Rechavi embodies this ideal. In a single career, he has demonstrated that memories can be inherited across generations and use DNA sequencing to reconstruct the 2,000-year-old Dead Sea Scrolls. But this year, he's focusing his ingenuity on a problem which is stifling the creativity of scientists all across the world. Peer review is a 350-year-old system that we rely on to keep scientists in check, and a system that scientists rely on for honest critique. That system is broken. It's now a slow, biased bottleneck that can stall advancements for years. Oded's answer? QED, an AI platform that analyzes papers in minutes, not months or even years. It breaks research into key claims, checks logic, and highlights missing controls. It strips away all prestige and all identity, offering a pure, unbiased critique. The scientific community is listening. Since October, over 5,000 labs have signed up, and a new partnership with bioRxiv allows for seamless integration from review to preprint. Today, Oded is here to tell us what science can look like when creativity finally breaks free. Join me in vivo with Dr. Oded Rechavi on fixing the broken system. Dr. Rechavi, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for being the first guest to appear twice on the podcast. That's a great honor for me.
I'm honored. I didn't know. Great. Thank you for having me again.
My absolute pleasure. Now, over the last couple of years, there's this phrase that we've heard over and over and over again, and that's trust the science. Now, this phrase, this mantra relies really on something very, very crucial, and that's the sanctity of the review process. Something that's been, the gold standard for publication since 1665. But as you hilariously outline on your X account, I think you would agree, it's broken in some ways. And not just that, it's become extremely painful for scientists. They dread it. It's a big part of what they do when they really want to be creative and want to be focusing on answering questions and solving problems. So why don't we start there? We'll get to this beautiful solution that you've got, that you've just launched, QED. We'll get to that. It's a wonderful way to get around this problem. But let's talk about the review process. What is it? Why is it so important? And how has it become broken here in 2025?
Well, I think every scientist and academics in general, everyone is familiar with the review process. Which means that you send your paper to a journal, and then the editor first decides whether the paper should be sent to review, and then a few of your colleagues get the assignment of reviewing it. That's how it works. It didn't always work like that. In fact, it's not that old. Of course, when Newton published his papers, they were not reviewed. But the idea is very nice that your colleagues will give you feedback. This is how the science is improved, not only to catch you when you're wrong, but also to give you helpful feedback for improvement. It's an admirable idea. The problem is that it faces many difficulties. First of all, there's a limited number of experts who are free and available to give this service. We should all do it, but there are millions of papers being published every year, and the system is overwhelmed. Papers are becoming more and more complex, and at least for me, it takes probably a day to do a proper job reviewing a paper. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that it's if you really want to do a good job. And aside from that, there's the problem that people have all kinds of conflicts of interest. Not always. Some of them do it for the sake of improving science, and that's great. But in many cases, just because people are people and humans, and there are limited resources and emotions and all kinds of things, there would be conflict of interest. Of course, we are reviewing our competitors' papers. By definition, the experts who are best suited to review your work are your competitors. In many cases, they work on the exact same problem. And in certain cases, they might, be biased.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many studies showing all kinds of biases, and not only by competitors, but biases based on where you come from, which university you work in, whether you're a male or a female or a certain minority. I mean, this is all documented in many, many studies. And it makes sense because we are people, and people have these biases. Aside from that, on just the technical level, it's really hard to do proper review. The editors are overwhelmed. The reviewers are overwhelmed. Yes, there might be, a handful of experts capable of reviewing my papers in a particular niche topic, but in many cases they will not be available, and then the task will fall on someone who is less equipped to do the job. So the system is failing, and we know that. Sometimes it works great. Many people will attest that their papers were improved by peer review, but in many cases it doesn't. And if you just look at the statistics, then I don't know exactly how much time it normally takes for a paper to go through the process from submission to acceptance on average. But at least for me personally, it's anecdotal, but I think it is representative. In many cases, it takes more than a year.
Yeah.
This is a huge delay of the science, and it's also a torture. It really takes the joy out of everything, and more often than not, your students need to graduate. They are no longer there for the revision process. It also works, one after the other. You submit to one journal, you get rejected in certain cases after you do the revision, which costs you sometimes millions of dollars. And then you get rejected, and you need to start the process all over from the beginning. So it's not working great, and I think the situation is only getting worse in this age where people are generating more and more papers, also using an AI. So while everyone acknowledges pretty much that there are problems with the system, many people think that there's just no way of changing it because it's so old and entrenched.
Foundational, yeah.
Yeah, and also the journals, they over the years acquired certain prestige, and people are addicted to that. We are more and more addicted to the prestige of certain journals, and we are willing, unfortunately, to pay a huge price in our well-being, also in the publication speed. And also, I think this might be the worst aspect of it. I think that the process distorts science. People write the papers in a certain way to get past the reviewers.
Yes, absolutely. And this, I would love for you to touch on this idea of addiction, and sort of, there's this term that people who are not in science may have heard before, and it's impact factor. And it's something that scientists chase, which maybe blindly and maybe for no good reason. But what is impact factor?
So an impact factor is a number which is calculated per journal, not per paper, estimating how prestigious this particular journal that you published in is. And in certain universities, in many universities, they look at this number, and this determines your chances of getting a promotion or getting hired, getting tenure, and so on. It's an average, a number which is given per journal, which is an average of sort of all the papers that were published there. So some journals have a very low impact factor, while in certain cases they publish amazing papers. Like BBRC, it's not the most prestigious journal, but ubiquity in the first paper was discovered there. So the very foundational discovery that led to the Nobel Prize. And of course, Nature journal has a very high impact factor, but not every paper there is equally great. And this number is also hacked in many different ways, and the journals hack it. So it's a horrible measure. There are other measures that are all bad, pretty much. The age index, measures how old you are, and so on.
Yeah, another issue, which I've seen over the years, are brilliant scientists deciding not to continue in the research, in the research field because they don't want to deal with publications. They don't want to run their own lab because they don't want to be chasing this publication grants and that sort of thing, which grants are also reliant on high impact factor publications, and not to mention promotions. There's this idea of publish or perish. It's this philosophy or paradigm that exists in the research world that really stifles research, because instead of focusing on solving a problem, what is in the forefront in a lot of scientists' minds is this idea: I have to publish, rather than focusing on the answer. Maybe spending 3 years on a question and then publishing, rather than publishing every year, and that does stifle science. I'm curious, what is the worst experience that you've had in terms of publication, without giving out any names or without giving out any publications? What are some of the?
Well, it's a tough competition because I had many experiences, and in the end, I do publish successfully, but it's really tiring. It's really tiring, and especially it takes a toll on the student.
Mm-hmm.
So my personal record is 6 years under review.
Oh my God.
And this is something you can see. You can look at the discrepancy between the date of the preprint that I posted and the actual publication.
Wow.
And I had multiple cases where it took 2 years and more. And 4 years, I had another 4 years. I know what was the most painful. Sometimes it's partly my fault because it takes me years to do the revisions, and the student meanwhile leaves for a postdoc or something else, and then I have to replace this person, and it's a big challenge. But it's also the actual reviews that you get. I mean, if you're an experienced PI, you've seen everything, although it never ceases to surprise me, the process, really. But if you're a student, the first time you're getting peer review, sometimes the quality could be very bad, or the reviewers can be borderline abusive.
Mm-hmm.
They have huge power because they are anonymous. People don't realize that.
Yes, that was going to be my next point.
Right. The reviewers are anonymous, so they can hide behind the anonymity. And because of this situation of limited resources, people can sometimes behave very badly. Again, not everyone. Some people are saints and great, but you cannot count on that. And I think most of us would admit that we suffer.
Yeah, there's this meme that pops up often on X and on your account is reviewer number 2, right? Anonymous reviewer number 2. Do you think that the review process should be anonymous, remain anonymous?
That's a big question. I mean, in many cases now, this is something relatively new. You can say who you are after the process is over.
Right.
You can sign your review. But you'd notice, and this is not surprising, that people only sign when they give good reviews, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there could be retaliation if you give someone it would leak who gave the review. It could be catastrophe for them. And because we are as scientists, and this is the problem, we are super fragile. We depend constantly on the reviews by others.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in your field, there would only be a few people, your paper will be circling around, and your grants, and any enemy you make is a real problem. For me, I mean, now I'm a full professor. I went through many phases of promotion. I estimate that people wrote for me probably 60 letters or something over the years. I needed 60 letters of recommendation or something like that for all the promotions, something like that. So it's a lot of people, and you need all of them to be good.
Right.
So you can't really make them enemies. And I think what happens, and this is partly the fault of of this idea of letters of recommendation. I wrote a paper against that. Partly it's this dependency on peer review. that is turning scientists into cowards.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of exchanging ideas just to improve the science, and this is how science improves.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Contradict one another, everyone knows that. Instead of doing that, people are just really afraid of retaliation, and for good reason, because we are extremely fragile. All we have is our good name, and reviewers have huge power over us. So this was also called the tyranny of the reviewer.
Mm-hmm.
Paper. The question is, what do you do about it? How do you get around it? Because we do need feedback. The papers improve because of the feedback. We are desperate for feedback at any level. Students need feedback. The PIs are, first of all, they don't know everything, and second, they are not always available to give constructive feedback. And also, the most experienced scientists in the world, they need feedback, and we all have blind spots. And but good feedback is hard to find.
Yeah, and these journals are in many cases for-profit businesses, which I'm not against at all. But it does remind me there's a little bit of an analogy between that business and college athletics. You have, in that case, you have schools making billions of dollars on the backs of athletes who don't see any remuneration. They're starting to see a little bit now, at least in the States, but it's the same here. You've got scientists that don't, benefit from the profits that they're making, but not just that, the people who are involved in the review process are oftentimes just volunteering and not getting any monetary incentives, which is not, an ideal per se, but I mean, it's an interesting analogy, and it's oftentimes expected of you as a professor in a position that you sit on a couple of review boards or grant review boards, and that takes you away from your research time, but I mean, it's a noble thing to do. So speaking of noble, there's an interesting parallel that you bring up in one of your blog posts regarding the term peer review and how that has some problems in the terminology, at least. Can you explain your viewpoint on that?
Yes, it's just the history of the term. Right. It wasn't always what people think it is. And this brings me to what we are trying to do, which is AI review. And the idea that we're not creating peer review. The AI is not your reviewer, and it's not your peer, and it doesn't have to be. I think that just like when you go to an MRI and you get scans, the machine is not your peer, but it's just better to do its job, which is to diagnose problems in your body. I think it's not this idea that by definition, the people examining your work should be your peers. I don't understand exactly why it has to be this way. And I just want to quickly comment about what you said previously about the journals being for profit. Yes. Many journals are for profit. Some journals are not for profit. And I agree that it's a problem that we are doing all the work. We are writing the papers, reviewing the papers, in many cases even arranging the figures, and we pay to publish the papers that we write, and we pay to read the papers that we write.
Yeah, a lot.
And really, it's a lot. So in some journals, it can be many thousands of dollars, and the universities pay also millions for subscriptions. And nowadays, more and more papers are open.
Yes,
open access. But most of it's us, the authors, who pay for this open access, and we pay a lot.
Right. So let's get into solutions. Before we get into your specific solution, I there haven't been many updates to this system. The only ones I can really think about is this open access idea. So the biggest one being PLOS or PLOS One from the Public Library of Science. In a way, it sort of democratizes at least access. Now, your solution, QED, it democratizes access to review, which is absolutely fantastic. And there have been very few, I would say, tangible solutions that AI has produced as of yet. We don't have AI that's solving physics or solving engineering on an appreciable level. And that's not what you're doing here, but you are offering a solution to a very big problem. So QED, my first question is, how do you say it? And does that acronym, is it Quadrant Demonstratum?
Yes, okay. That's exactly that.
Right.
We say QED, although some people working with us say QED, and we kind of kept it vague how to pronounce it. Personally, I say QED. Some other people say QED. And yes, the idea is what has been demonstrated.
Yes.
What how you write in the end of an equation that you solve. And what we're doing is we're not writing the paper for you. We're not doing the science for you. There are many companies trying to do AI, scientists also trying to do AI, even that write papers. This is not us at all. We don't generate. We give you feedback on your own work. And this is the important part. And kind of neutralizes some of the concern regarding AI hallucinations and things like that. At the end, you're getting feedback. And of course, we try to minimize, and I think we could do a good job at minimizing hallucinations anyway. There are barely any. But in any case, you're only getting feedback on the work, on your ideas and the work that you generate. And the idea behind QED is to give you feedback that will help you publish your work, publish better science, highlight your weak points and your strengths as well. What we do is we take a paper and we, first of all, strip it out of any signs of identity. So we remove your name, your affiliation, so it will be judged based on its merit, and we break it into claims. And the claims are the things that you claim that you have found in your paper. We deal with research papers at the moment, not reviews, for now at least. And then we arrange these claims on a logical tree. And we show which claims you've made, how the claims are connected, the subclaims, and so on. And we also, for each claim, look for gaps in the logic, possible problems. And we are not fraud detectors. So there are other companies trying to detect manipulations and cheating stuff like that. We don't do that, at least for now. What we do is find real problems, for example, missing controls, weak arguments, contradictions with the literature, statistical problems, things like that. We highlight these, we rank them based on severity, and then we offer solutions. And the solutions range from textual solutions, which are just small clarifications that you can add or change to improve your statement. So, for example, we study transgenerational epigenetic inheritance, but we study it in worms, in C. elegans nematodes. If I say, temperatures generate transgenerational responses, and I fail to mention that this is in C. elegans, people will get the wrong impression. And, my claim would be strengthened if I declare that properly. And this is something QED will suggest.
That's impressive.
And we also, and we also offer experimental solutions, long-term solutions and short-term solutions. So things that will take you a long time, and things that will take you just a little bit of work. And it's very important to understand that this tool is this platform currently serves the authors. So we find many gaps. We suggest many ways to fix the gaps. But we are addressing the authors. We are suggesting things that are not necessarily required for the paper to be accepted to a journal X. Yes, we try to focus it as much as possible and give you only the meaningful suggestions. So you can comment in the platform if you think that a gap is just a picky gap or something that you can tell us, and this is how the algorithm improves. But it is possible that some of the gaps we find and some of the solutions that we suggest are just our long-term solutions and not necessarily required for this particular paper. It is true that we can also adjust this tool so it fits better for knowing whether this is something that you must have to get the paper accepted or not. We're not there yet, but we can certainly do this in the future. I'm trying to move away from the idea of review as a gatekeeper, deciding what's accepted or not. I think that ideally it should be your paper, what you think, your paper that you stand behind, alongside the review that you got, that everyone can see. And then the gaps that were surfaced, you should be able to have the place to comment on these and say whether you think it's a real gap. If you think this is just a picky gap that the reviewer, whether it's an AI reviewer or a human reviewer, if you think it's just speaking on you, or maybe it's inaccurate, then you should have the ability to comment. Or perhaps, if QED gave you a comment and you found that the gap was indeed worth addressing, and you did that either by changing the text or by adding an experiment, that I want you to be able to display that and show the world that you took the efforts, you took your time, made the effort to improve the work. Here is a record of everything that I did after I got feedback to have a stronger paper.
That's important, because not only are you democratizing the process here, but you're also adding a layer of transparency. That is. I
also think so.
That's very important.
I also think so. I think it's transparency, and it's also provenance. Now, many papers are being generated just by ChatGPT or so. In many cases, even the authors are not real. People are inventing papers, inventing authors just for the sake of having more citations. If you see the paper and you get this report of, this is the review that it got at time X, and then they did this and this work, and they added more and more layers of responses and comments and so on, you get more information, more transparency, and also provenance, which is harder to fake. You can sort of follow the paper along its evolution, how it improves.
Right.
And my hope is, recently, we launched this, what was it, about a month ago or so, a little bit more than a month probably. And we already have, I think, something like 5,000 labs. So that's a lot.
That's amazing.
In my opinion.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, for more than 1,000 institutes across the world. And maybe 2 weeks ago or so, or maybe 3 weeks ago, but something like that, we announced also a collaboration with the archives, Open Archive, bioRxiv, MedArchive. So now you can, through their system, go to QED and get your review, improve your paper. In the future, I want also to have a report that you can attach to your preprint from QED, sort of an unbiased report. You can't mess with it. Currently, what we're doing now is we're improving the system so you cannot tamper with the review, with the report. But then when you're ready, it's totally up to you. You can attach to your preprint a report and also your response to the report, to the comments that you got. And then it's sort of an additional layer between preprint and paper. Perhaps for some people, or more importantly for some institutions, it would be the only thing that is required. You have your preprint, you have an unbiased report, which is explainable, transparent, and comprehensive. And then people can actually say, okay, this is the work, and this allows me to understand whether there are any problems with the work, and also the report would also highlight the strength and the novel parts of the work. This is something that we already have in the system. And the idea that is sort of you detach or decouple the journals from the evaluation step. I still think that they can exist, but I think that to scale good peer review or good review, you need to do something.
This idea of a untamperable report, have you thought about putting those on a blockchain?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about these ideas. To tell you the truth, I don't know enough about this to say how to say much about this. But you mean for the sake of this being something you can't tamper with?
You can't tamper with, and it's there locked in history. So it's in a ledger. It tells you when it was created, who it was created by, and anybody can look it up. It's almost the opposite of a Wikipedia, the ability to go in and modify things in Wikipedia. Anybody can do it on Wikipedia, but this would be the opposite. So it's locked forever. You can see the provenance of it. Just a thought.
But I think also in Wikipedia, you can go back and see who made changes. No?
That's true, yes. So I do have a question for you. So presumably your model is trained on as much literature as you can possibly get your hands on. This literature also is going to include errors, fraud. It's going to include mistakes. How do you deal with that?
So first of all, it's important to say for people using QED that we don't train on the data that you upload to QED.
Okay.
If it's unpublished, then it's yours, private and secure. This is very important.
Absolutely.
The only thing we learn from you is the comments that you give us. So if you point that a particular type of comment is unhelpful or something, then we learn not to give these type of comments and so on. Okay, but not the data itself. That is very important. When it comes to learning from the literature, yes, we lean on the literature. We lean also on open reviews, but not only that, we also look at the paper itself, whether it has the right logic, the required controls, and things like that. And if there is a contradiction with the literature, which stems from the fact that the literature is wrong, then this will be written, and you can comment on it, and the people can go and look into it in case this is a sort of the mistake.
Understood. You know what I'm just suggestion that you can throw away or you can take. But as a scientist who loves protocols and assays and optimization and just the actual technical part of research, what I would find very helpful is, because you said you give suggestions. I would love it if there was a suggestion and then a link to a protocol or to somebody else's method that I could just jump into, copy, and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something that we want to do. It's a great idea. We give references currently, but giving access to immediately to the protocol of how to do things, that's a great suggestion, and we look into it. I like it a lot.
Difficult to implement, I'm sure, but I would love that. Do you envision a time? Because this whole idea, this is absolutely fascinating, and I like I told you when we spoke before, I wish this existed when I was doing research. And do you envision a time where the bottom line report that QED generates is almost required, the way that here in North America you sort of require an emissions test when you go to get your car certified for a license plate? You need to have it done. Do you see a time when this might be something like that required?
It's a good question. I mean, we want this to help the process, not to add a bureaucratic step.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So ideally, this would speed up, complement, improve the current situation of review. We don't want this to be a hurdle, and we certainly want it to make the scientist's life better. So it's true, some people using the system now tell them, yes, it demolishes their paper. It gives them tons of work. I remind the people listening that currently it's an author-centered tool. So yes, it gives you lots of comments. In the future, as I said, the vision is that this is something that you will do voluntarily. You will attach your report to your preprint. You address the comments that you get. You either agree with them, you don't agree with them. But I just want it to be your incentive to do this, to show the world that you are transparent, that you are listening to the criticism, that you use the feedback to improve your work. I don't want this to be something that stands in your way to publication. I would want this to speed up publication, make it fun. I mean, of course, we all want feedback, and we want the paper. We are just sort of addicted to this system where we need to publish a lot, regardless of quality in many cases.
Yeah, I like that, to bring back the fun to research, because it's what makes it fun is immediate feedback. If you're lucky enough to work in a lab where you have multiple postdocs or senior PhDs or access to your PI, which is not always possible, and you can get feedback every single day and be mentored. I was lucky to have that when I worked. That makes it fun. But I saw people working in other labs that didn't have that, and it is a grind. And so this would be a great source of that. Now, as it stands today, are we limited with QED only to biology?
Currently, yes.
Okay.
I mean, if you run papers from other disciplines, you'll get a domain warning that says that we don't deal with that. Papers in physics and so on. But we will expand gradually to other domains as well.
Fantastic. I would imagine you've experienced some pushback. Have you? What sort of pushback have you experienced?
Yeah. So when we launched this, which means we didn't do any PR. I just tweeted about it.
Yeah, it was a surprise, a pleasant surprise.
Right. So we got a lot of feedback. We got a lot of attention, more than 500,000 views and lots of comments. I would say 90-something% of the comments were really good, to the degree that someone even wrote, so it was a picture of me in the tweet, with a QED shirt, and someone wrote, what are the chances? He wrote like that. He wrote, let's do an exercise in Bayesian logic. What are the chances that this dude is deleting all the bad comments because all the comments are good? Okay? And then I replied, I don't think you can delete comments.
True.
And then someone else, I already went to sleep, wrote, no, you can't delete comments. But then this other person who made the original tweet said, but maybe he's blocking people with bad comments. And then someone else, again, my savior, replied, possibly, but you can see here, and he put some link, the people that he blocked, and he didn't block anyone. So, yes, the majority of the comments were really, really good. There were a few skeptics for sure. And there, the criticism is, I would divide it into two types of criticism. One type of criticism is Richard Sever from bioRxiv called it in his tweet, where he announced also our collaboration. He called it a reflexive anti-AI comments. Anti-AI. Yeah. I can understand the fear, of course. We are all. I mean, it's an amazing technology. It's also a scary technology. People are afraid of being replaced. They are afraid of the mistakes that AI can do, and so on. So this is one type of comments, which is not saying anything about the quality or the actual product. They're just saying, don't do it. AI is bad. This is a review is strictly a human activity. Someone even wrote, it's a privilege and a luxury to do a review. I don't know if everyone would sympathize with that. Right. I mean, yes, maybe some people, but it's also, there are many problems with it, as we said. And I think that yes, I mean, you should, and you are encouraged to continue to give feedback to your colleagues. Great. But in many cases, this feedback is not available and it's not of good quality. So this is something to supplement it. I'm all for giving a great feedback. So I don't see the problem in that. And I think in many cases, the humans are the problem. And our humanity is the problem. We are affected by emotions and all kinds of things. And this is something that AI can utilize. Certainly, when you combine the two, you should, in theory, get a stronger system. The other type of comments are comments about the quality. There are very few comments about the quality, about the quality being low. And there again, I would separate it into two comments, two quality-related comments. One of them is people are saying that the AI is just killing them, giving them harsh reviews, and like a reviewer free type of review. And then I would repeat what I said before. It's an author-centered tool. So yes, it finds every mistake that you made. It doesn't mean you have to address all of these problems to get the paper accepted, because we are against accepted and rejected. We just want to give you feedback. Do whatever you want with it. And we are also improving the system. It will be less picky and give you more, only the helpful comment. And the other types of sort of challenges to the system were people trying to hack it, like upload fake papers, and then say, we uploaded a fake paper, it really catches. But as I said, we are not fraud detectors. We take your data as genuine and we try to give you feedback, but we learn. And since, yesterday, we are also much better at identifying fake papers. Not perfect, because this is not our goal, but just you're kind of fooling yourself if you're uploading a fake paper to QED.
Yeah, that's true.
So by and large, it's that. Not so many people say that we are wrong or hallucinate or give you sort of picky comments. Most of I think the quality is really good already. And like anything that is AI, I promise you that this version is the worst that you'll ever use.
That's right.
It will be better, right? And the rate of improvement is very fast, and it's happening. You cannot stop it. The AIs are strong, and they will become stronger. And I think it's already comparable to good human review, and in many cases probably surpasses it already. And it will be better in the future.
One of the things that you mentioned is emotion, and it's actually one of the criticisms that people have against AI is that it's AI, other models or other services, AI slop. There's no emotion. It's dead. But that, in fact, here you've parlayed into an advantage, right? You're using the emotionlessness of AI to give you a thorough, objective review. So that's great. I love that flipping of a.
Yeah, and I'll say more. We intentionally don't try to dress up as a human. Some people, and some AIs, AI chatbots, try to mimic a human,
Yes.
and they even in the way that the AI speaks and so on. We intentionally made it very technical. The review, the report that you get, it doesn't look like a human review. We break the paper into claims, we arrange it on a tree, we list the gaps and so on. Intentionally, we want to make sure. I mean, you're getting criticism, you're getting feedback, but it's not a human, and it's not meant to be a human. And I think that in many cases is an advantage. And when you pair it also with a human review, you get the good out of both.
Do you envision a time when QED could be used for not papers per se, but let's say nonfiction books written by scientists?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think in the end, yes. I mean, what we are trying to develop is an AI that thinks critically. Some of the concern about AI that are always pleasing you.
Mm-hmm.
And we want the AI to think critically. And this is what we're developing. It's much easier when you deal with science, which should be semi-formal, and where the evidence should be presented so you can assess it. In many cases, yes, people are designing AIs to identify fake news, but then the evidence is often the problem that prevents people from judging the situation properly. In science, everything should be transparent. In theory, everything should be there, presented in sort of a formal way, so it's easier. But yes, I can imagine a world where this expands to things beyond science, certainly to some areas which are close to science,
right,
but not proper science, like, I don't know, nutrition or things like that.
Yes.
There is a science of nutrition, but in many cases, it's not as rigorous as the life sciences or things like that.
So you did drop this out of nowhere on X. How long have you been working on this for?
So I've been thinking about it for years. There's a paper, there's an interview with me in Current Biology. I think it's 2020. It's the beginning of the pandemic, where I already talk about this. AI was not there in terms of the capabilities. Even when we formally started to work on that, it wasn't clear at all whether this is possible, because the capacity of AI to think critically was considered its weakest point. But we started actually building it last September, so it was a year and 2 months ago.
Wow, that's quick. And you've got quite the team too. I would encourage, I'm going to link it in the bottom, obviously, to go to your website. If you are a scientist, give it a shot. I think right now you have free access via the beta release, so you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's free. It's free to scientists, and the idea is, as long as we can, and this is the plan for the future, is to keep it free for academics. As long as you have an university email address, it's free.
Yeah, fantastic. I guess I have one more question for you in terms of the AI. What are the biggest challenges that you guys are dealing with right now? What are some of the downfalls of AI that are presenting themselves in QED? Because there are many, like you said, the critical thinking is probably the biggest challenge, but are there any others that you're trying to overcome?
Yeah, so one of the big challenges, and we started dealing with that. We're far from perfect yet, but we will improve, and it requires diving deep into each particular example, is looking at the figures and the data itself. So yes, we already look at the data. We already look at the figures, but there are many things we can do better. We don't look at videos yet, for example. We don't dive into your sequencing data to find patterns there and to recheck your Go analysis, things like that. Go enrichments, but we will do that, and I think that it's an important part of assessing science. Yes, everything should also be reported in writing, but you also want to dive deep into the actual data. We are doing it, but there's a long way to go to get to where we want to be.
So, for example, in the future, you might, for a geneticist who makes a claim on sequencing or in their methods describes some cloning protocol, have QED then blast that against a sequence through NCBI or PubMed?
Exactly. And this is something that only a few human reviewers would do.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, and the value could be amazing.
Yes.
Discovering a mistake in your cloning that really ruins everything or something.
Fantastic. And so,
or maybe even identifying some things that you didn't think about.
Yes, that would be great. And I could imagine, the multimodal aspect of Grok or ChatGPT, meaning it works on text, it works on videos and images, is very difficult, especially when you're dealing with figures. It's not very often that you see actual photographs per se in a publication. I mean, when you're doing physiology or development, you see photographs, but there's a lot of strange graphs and figures and the way that data is represented in research articles. So that I would imagine is a huge challenge.
Yeah, I mean, you could imagine a world where you just put the raw data and we make the figures for you, sort of in an unbiased way, so you won't mess with the axes and stuff like that.
Very nice.
I mean, I don't know if you necessarily want to do that because there is some room for narrative and creativity in how you design your figures. But you can imagine that. You can also imagine a world where you just put in the results and we write the introduction for you, putting in only the right reference or the true reference, no reference to the first person who actually showed it and so on. Well, again, there are many problems in papers. The downside is, of course, we want to give still some creative freedom for writing the paper, but we can also look at the comparison between an introduction that we would write automatically and what the authors wrote to try to do to see whether it's properly written or whether the story, the narrative fits the result and so on.
Yes, thank you. I was just going to get to narrative because one of the things that scientists learn very early in their training is this idea of what is the story? What is the narrative that you're trying to tell? And that's a beautiful creative aspect of research that I really liked. And sometimes it's a downfall because you go into a research program or question with a narrative prior to even, what you want to say before you gather any data. That can be bad. But what would be nice is if QED, because right now it's identifying claims and it gives you the logic tree. But if it gave you a second tab or panel or whatever, where it says, hey, maybe think of, or identifies the narrative and it identifies the story and then might suggest changes.
Right. Maybe there's a narrative that better describes your result.
Yes.
And it's true. We want to leave some room for creativity. Yes. That's very important. But there's always this tension between the most parsimonious way of telling the story.
Yes.
Or a more decorated way of that might make it more interesting, and it's something to think about. And also, it helps me already. Sometimes, I write a paper, or a student of mine writes a paper. I run it in QED, and then it lists the claims, and it also lists, if you go, that there's a place where you can see what's new, and it lists the novel aspects of your work and also the less novel aspects of your work. And sometimes I see in a paper that I wrote or a student of my postdoc wrote that the thing that I think is the most novel is not listed in the top 3. And I say, oh, maybe I did a bad job highlighting the stuff that's most important to me. That actually happened to me, this example.
Interesting.
And when I went back to the paper and read it, I realized I did a poor job highlighting the stuff that's actually most important. And then you can rewrite or improve it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I would find that very useful in a way, sort of adjusting your narrative in a roundabout way. That's very cool. So let's say in an ideal world, your grandest vision of this, let's say in 2030, where do you see QED?
So in 2030, my dream would have been that, this frees us academics to actually do. Ideally, we just, you as your results come out and are ready, you're willing to share them with the world. You already put them online. They come together with the feedback. Everyone can see it. Science is sped up and it becomes more robust and replicable. And we can do this for the entire scientific corpus.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I think that would be extremely dramatic in how we share the work, how we do the work. Maybe we'll tell stories differently because we won't think of how do I publish it? how do I get this published to, actually what I want to study next and what's my next question. And also in the way that we read with the papers, we'll be able to trust what we read and also identify the interesting claims that are required for our next steps.
Do you have, I know you've announced a recent partnership with Archive. Do you have any desire to perhaps spin out a publication arm of QED of its own?
That's a very good question. So,
because presumably it could happen the publication process then can happen very quickly.
Right. I mean, it's something to think about. I think we need to rethink the idea of publication.
Yes.
What is a publication? What is a publication? I think that certainly in the near future, I want this QED feedback to be available alongside your paper. And perhaps this is already a publication.
In a sense, it is. And oftentimes, yes. I mean, when I'm researching for interviews or just for my lectures, I rely on preprints off very often because they're there. It is the most current science.
And by the time they're published, I don't care about them anymore.
Sometimes 6 years later.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So that's awesome. Congratulations on that. I'm super excited to see what happens. And are you guys looking for investors or funds? How are you guys doing in that sense?
So currently, we don't need additional funds. We are okay. In the future, probably to expand or do more things, we will need it, but not at the moment.
One of the things I love about you as a scientist is that you're a student of history. And you can speak about the history of science for a long time. I mean, in our previous discussion, we talked about sort of the inheritance of genetic memory, and I learned a lot. There was a beautiful lecture. You did the same with Huberman. Yep. Now, you had a very interesting, so pivoting to something completely different now, you had a very interesting experience working with the Dead Sea Scrolls. As a student of history, that like mega history, almost ancient history, that must have been amazing. So just to, some background, in 1947, there was a shepherd boy who was looking for a goat of his that he lost, and he threw a stone into a cave. This is in Qumran, which is now present day West Bank. And he heard some jars break open, and in there lay the Dead Sea Scrolls, the oldest manuscripts of the Bible that are available to us now, and perhaps the most important historical manuscript find ever. You had a hand in trying to piece that together using very, advanced biological, we're talking about sequencing, DNA sequencing. So if you can tell us how you got involved in that, and a little bit in regards to what you did to help push along that story.
Sure, absolutely. I'll get to that in a second. I'll just tell you as a segue to this story. Please. From the previous story. Yes, I'm very interested in history. In the past, also papers were written very differently. We now have a bigger project where we are trying to replicate. First of all, we are translating and then choosing the most interesting studies. We're trying to replicate work that was done in Vienna in the beginning of the 20th century. In this institute, it was called the BVA.
Yes.
There's no trace of it now. It was destroyed, and everyone working there was either deported or killed. And they published hundreds of papers. Some of them are also dealing with inheritance of acquired traits and questions like that, which interests me. So we are going back to these studies. We got a grant from Human Frontiers to go back and choose and revive these forgotten papers and try to find the most interesting ones and replicating them.
Oh, that's interesting.
This is something I will also involve. And I will also involve QED in that, in trying to assess whether the papers are worth replicating or not. Okay? But yes, I'm interested in many historical things that are related to science and in general. And the Dead Sea Scrolls project came about by total coincidence. So when I just started my lab, that was in 2012. This is literally the month that I joined Tel Aviv University. We had a retreat for all the new faculty in the university. People from all corners of the campus, so arts, science, everything. And then in the evening, they took us to a restaurant, and we took a bus from the hotel to the restaurant. And on the way there, it was a 20-minute ride. I sat next to Noam Mizrahi, who was back then he's a biblical scholar. Now he moved to Jerusalem University. And we started talking about what I do in the lab and what he does in his studies. I told him about nematodes, C. elegans, epigenetic inheritance. And he told me about the Dead Sea Scrolls in Qumran that he studies from a linguistic angle and so on, and as a biblical scholar. And we started thinking, what can we do together? And then he told me, the thing about the scroll, there are thousands of different pieces, and it's a big challenge assembling them. It's like trying to assemble an unknown number of puzzles with an unknown number of pieces, when many of them are already missing. And he told me that there was a researcher many years ago who tried to look at holes that the worms made in the skulls, because they were lying in caves for 2,000 years, and trying to look at the entry point and the exit point of the worm in an attempt to match fragments that are connected. And then we continued to think about this idea, and we understood that biology, not only of nematodes, but of the fragments themselves, the parchments themselves, could help us. And what we did was we took advantage of the fact that the parchments are written on animal skin.
Yes.
Are made from animal skin. So from each piece, we extracted the ancient DNA of the animal from which it was made 2,000 years ago. And then we tried to match the pieces based on their genetic similarity. We used ancient DNA sequencing. We sequenced literally billions of sequences. It was very deep sequencing. The coverage is extremely low, and the DNA is very fragmented because it's ancient. And we managed in certain situations to piece some fragments together and also to piece apart certain fragments. And together with Noam and other people that gave us other perspectives from an archaeological perspective, a biblical scholar expertise, we managed to make some interesting connections between some scrolls, and also to break some connections that were suggested in the past. It's the most interdisciplinary project that I was part of. I was a part of a few different interesting collaborations, but this was the most fun. By the way, this paper was also 4 years under review. In the end, it was published. Everything is okay, but it was under review for a very long time, and the project itself took more than 8 years, or something like 8 years.
Fascinating. And I think ultimately what you, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the biggest the ways that you were able to piece these things together is realizing the fact that some of these skins were from cow and some of these skins were from either goat or sheep. And that at the time when these were written, they were essentially, it was impossible to herd cows in that location. So that allowed you to determine where they came from. And then that gave you completely different context as to what was being written by who and the provenance.
Right. So one of the things was really to show that since two pieces were found to be derived from cow skin, most of the pieces were made out of sheep, then we understood that they must have come from elsewhere. And this shed light on some weird things in their connections and so on.
Right.
So that was one thing. Another thing that we managed to say regarding provenance, which was very telling, is that, most of the scrolls that were found in Qumran. This is the main site, which is, these are caves next to the Dead Sea. But some other pieces were found elsewhere, and we sampled pieces from all over the area, including from other areas like Masada. Masada was the last stronghold to where the Jews ran away. And there's this famous story of they were there until they were sieged, and eventually they all killed themselves. And some of the scrolls that were found in Qumran were unknown before, and they are very Qumran specific. It's called Qumran. I forgot now the technical name, but it means that they are very typical of Qumran.
Okay.
Style and the things that they talked about and so on. One of these documents is called the Songs of the Sabbath Sacrifice, which is really Qumran specific, Qumran typical. Okay, and then and in general, there's a big question about the Dead Sea Scrolls, which, as you said, are the most important archaeological finding we have in Israel. The question is, yes, we found 25,000 fragments of these scrolls and lots of text that tells us a lot about this crucial period in the history of the area when It's important for Judaism. It's important for Christianity because Jesus might have been there and so on at that time. But the question is, how representative are these texts to what happened to the land in general? Imagine now that the country is destroyed in a nuclear war or something, and all that remains is the library of someone who was hiding in some cave in the desert, in the most difficult place you can imagine to live in, super hot. How representative would his library be compared to the library of a normal person living in Tel Aviv?
Right.
Or perhaps this is a total weirdo and there's no connection between that person's library and what we read in Tel Aviv, right? And we learn about the period based on what was found in Qumran in the desert where it's 40 degrees and there's no water and it's really hard to live. So what was interesting is that this Songs of the Sabbath Sacrifice, which is very Qumran specific, was also found in Metzada, which is the last of it. And people didn't know whether these songs, the fragments, the parchments, were just brought there by people who escaped from Qumran to Masada, because this is the most precious belonging. If you have to run, you take your scrolls with you, right? Or perhaps it's indicative of these songs being more common and well known across the land.
Okay.
If the sources are different, it will tell you that the collection in Qumran is much more important because it's more representative of what happened in the land in general. What we found in this particular case is that the scrolls in Masada and the scrolls in Qumran of the Dead Sea of this particular song, they both derive from sheep, but from two different breeds of sheep that are unrelated. All the scrolls in Qumran come from one particular type of sheep, and in Masada, the songs come from a totally different breed of sheep, suggesting that they didn't come from the same place. So maybe the scrolls were more, maybe the text in Qumran were more representative of what happens in the greater land in general.
Beautiful. What a beautiful example of interdisciplinary science, or just research in general. What is the current state of the Dead Sea Scroll project? Have they been completely solved, or are they still being worked on?
No, there's still some ambiguities and some places where they don't know exactly whether this piece fits here or there. And we are still involved in the lab in some ancient DNA work together with the Israel Research Antiquity authorities, doing all kinds of crazy things that will, again, probably take years to report. But yes, it's great fun. And this is something that we started our conversation by talking about how scientists are dependent on publications for their promotions, so here, this paper of mine was published in Cell. It was the cover of Cell. But many people told me that it doesn't help my, career necessarily, because it shows that I'm unfocused, or But of course I don't care. but this is one aspect of the architecture of academia, which is very problematic. That you are supposed to focus, and just carve your niche. And part of the reason that this is strategic, career-wise, is that when you work on one particular, very defined topic, then over the years, because your career takes 40 years, you know everyone in the field, you know your reviewer. You review their papers, they review your papers, you review their guts. It's much easier to make a career like that. When you suddenly divert to all kinds of weird things, it's harder. But I think this is what we are. But personally, I just need to follow my curiosity. We're not doing it for the money, we're doing it for the fun.
Absolutely.
So I think again, detaching the assessment from the human aspect, which is very limited, would benefit science, in my own opinion.
And to close the story, what an amazing, your next paper you publish perhaps on the Dead Sea Scrolls, you use QED to help you review that, and to go from 250 BC all the way to 2025 using AI to close that loop is quite amazing. I do have one technical question for you. You mentioned coverage of the genetic sequencing. What was you said very little. What was the most coverage that you got outside of a control?
So we had many controls. The controls are actually part of one of the most beautiful aspects of this paper,
Yes.
which I like a lot. I really recommend people to go and read this paper. I think it's my coolest paper.
It's a great paper.
Thank you. But we sequence both and analyze both the nuclear genome of the animals and the mitochondrial genome. We had higher coverage in the mitochondrial genome. And it's much easier looking at the mitochondrial coverage. I don't remember exactly the numbers of the coverage, but it was extremely sparse, which made the bioinformatics and in general the challenge a big challenge.
Yeah, for those who are not familiar with coverage, it's essentially if you take two samples that may or may not be related, if they're related and you sequence their DNA, how much overlap and identical matches there between two sequences. That's what we call coverage. And the more that you get, the more sure you can be in the identity of the sequence and the reliability of the overlap. So it's an important measure. And
also, the animals that grew here 2,000 years ago were not exactly identical to the animals that are here now, which was another challenge. Of course, the challenge of lots of contaminations, many of them modern, of humans and other organisms. It was a very challenging project. You need to do all the ancient DNA according to the highest standard, which means you're working in clean rooms, in astronaut suits, and so on, and sequence very deep. And you distinguish fragmented DNA sequences with ancient DNA patterns from modern sequences in many different ways.
Fascinating. I like to always end with some advice to current students or scientists. And I think in this case, what I'd like you to comment on is what I find awesome about biology, biotech, science in today's day and age is that there is room for an entrepreneurial spirit, which is what you're now a part of. And I love that. What would your advice be to a student or a researcher who's thinking about ideas outside of their lab work, outside of the research for a business or a service, and, they're playing with that idea?
So I think many people make the distinction between a career in science and a career in the industry or doing technology. I think that, and they are making a choice when they finish their PhD or a postdoc or in any stage of what do I choose, this or that. Mm-hmm. My advice there is that if you can, working on something outside of academia from within academia has many advantages. You have your day job, which is safe, relatively safe. And work in academia, it's great because it doesn't have to have a bottom line. You can just do it for the fun of it. But it's a great place from where you can go and do other things. That is, of course, much more true later in your career when you have tenure and so on, if you have tenure. But I think when people think about doing a PhD or doing a postdoc, I think that more and more, and this is also connected to AI, the more skill you have, the more you learn, there will be value for that also if you decide to leave academia. Since AI is going to replace some of the things that we do, the more knowledge you have, which is unique, that you acquired, things that you know about the world that only you know because you actually discovered it in the lab yourself and you dug deep into it and studied every aspect of it. That would have value even if you later decide to do something totally different. And you learn many skills as a scientist that I think will serve you also outside of academia. And part of that is I think that as a scientist, you learn how to be an entrepreneur. You have to do everything yourself. You have to push the project. You have to nag people with emails. So I think it prepares you for lots of different things, not necessarily being on the bench and pipetting.
Fantastic. Dr. Rechavi, I learned a lot. I'm very excited for QED and what it might offer to scientists now. I encourage everybody who's writing papers, in the process of writing papers, thinking about publishing, give it a shot. I think you'll be very impressed. And it's only going to...
And also that is also a good tool for reading critically. You just want to read a paper, run it through QED. It will show you, first of all, the claims, arrange them, and also find the weaknesses and also the strong points. So I use it also to read.
That's a very good point, because as scientists, you shouldn't be just a good writer, but you need to be first and foremost a good reader. And we'll end it on that. Dr. Rechavi, thank you for joining me. I look forward to doing it again in the future, and good luck with everything.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Thanks again.
My pleasure. Looking back on this conversation with Oded, I'm left with a quiet but powerful realization. The biggest threat to scientific creativity isn't lack of ideas or funding, it's the 360-year-old machinery we still use to judge them. We built a system where a single anonymous reviewer can delay a breakthrough for years, where prestige and impact factor have become more important than truth, and where young scientists are burning out before they ever get to do the work they dreamed of. Oded felt this pain very deeply. 6-year review cycles, students graduating before revisions are done, good people walking away. And instead of just complaining, he did what the best scientists do. He built a better tool. QED isn't anti-peer review, it's pro-science. It gives authors the fast, thorough, ego-free feedback most of us only wish we had. Puts the author back in control, adds real transparency, and maybe most importantly, reminds us that evaluation should serve discovery, not the other way around. Listening to Oded move seamlessly from inheriting memories in worms to sequencing 2,000-year-old parchment dust to launching an AI that's already in thousands of labs, you're reminded what happens when curiosity is allowed to run free. So, here are the questions I'm carrying with me. What could science accomplish if no good idea ever again had to wait 6 years to see daylight? What discoveries are we losing right now because someone is afraid of reviewer number 2? And when creativity is finally untethered from prestige and gatekeeping, who knows what we'll build next? Thank you, Oded, for reminding us what science feels like when it's fun again, and thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time in vivo.